Okay, so let's talk about something that I haven't seen anyone talk about. And as a former Dom, I can bring information to this conversation. So, and create this conversation. Doms are exploited by society, and then society turns on Doms and just completely just fucks them up. So, let's talk about this. So, there's a lot of high clientele like that come into BDSM. You're going to have a lot of politicians in BDSM. We get a lot of corporate men that come into BDSM to be domed, right? And there's also those who come in to abuse submissives. I worked in a dungeon, and this was in Philadelphia. I was only there for a day because I also got hired at the same time to do horse carriage driving, and I'm like, well, one of the I could always work at a fucking dungeon. What are the chances I'm going to get to work with horses? So I left to do that, but I was at this dungeon, and it was led by a dom, a female dom, and I'd say she was she was a dom, but she was a switch for pay. That makes sense. Um, and so she would come in, and there was a couple of submissives. I mean, just like a lot of stuff that's normalized in BDSM, or people would think it's like, oh, that's so sexy, is really disturbing. If you look at it, I mean, I was heavily in BDSM, and I was still watching it. Like some of the things that happened, like what the fuck. Um, so, and then you could see the other DOMs that, and I think at this point, how old was I? I was pretty young because I was in Philadelphia. I think I don't know, I was around either 21 or younger. Um, and so I was there. We were waiting for people to come in. And, one of the submissives, or the person who's identified as submissive, asked the Dom if she could have a bite of her food, and the Dom was disgusted and just threw the food on the floor. And then she ran to go eat it. And I'm like, okay. But there was a guy who came in, and I'm telling you, most of the guys who come in are from corporate America, and they either come to be dominated or they come to abuse a sub. So she comes up to me and she was like, um, because all the submissives were busy, and she's like, we have someone that's coming in. He wants to pay big money, and she's like, can you take a punch in the stomach? And I'm like, what? And she's like, it's okay, I'll just do it. I'm like, what the actual fuck? Hell no. Um, but this is the type of stuff that people come in and pay for. Okay, so some guy in corporate America came in because he wanted to punch a woman in the stomach. Okay, so you got to understand that BDSM is heavily led by patriarchal, racist, sexism. Like, I mean, well, patriarchal, sexism. It's a bit redundant, but just to really drive it home, like, this is the shit that is the foundation of BDSM. So even when you see women, you see these DOMs who are in positions of power. Now, most DOMs would absolutely not do that, right? And this is where you have the delineation between pro DOMs and lifestyle DOMs. Like if a guy were to go up to a lifestyle DOM and ask for that, she would either turn him away, or depending on the DOM, if she was more, and depending on the space, she would probably just slap him in the face. But in pro dom stuff, this is where it's like it's money comes into play, and it becomes trafficking, right? And so because doms don't just switch into submissives unless they're a switch, and maybe she was a switch, maybe that's information I didn't have, but they don't do that. um like full on doms just don't do that. They're not going to flip for, doesn't matter how much money you try and offer them. So there is a delineation between pro doming and lifestyle doming as well. But this is the type of shit like that's in BDSM, and men are hurt as well because there are male submissives. They are hurt. There are men who come in, and they pay to be hurt, and in their eyes, it's not hurtful. And I want to go a little bit, just for a second, a little bit deeper into that, but I will make a separate video on this. But what a submissive finds satisfying is not healthy. Okay, and I'll go into that a little bit more. But um, but yeah, so society exploits DOMs, especially pro-DOMs. Pro-DOMing is just sex trafficking, is being sex trafficked. Um, and pro-subbing is sex trafficking as well. But society exploits them, even lifestyle DOMs. There are people who um, can turn on a DOM and just completely just try and like set them as the villain of society, like, oh, these evil women. Does that sound fucking familiar to you? You know, throughout all of fucking history. Um, but meanwhile, male doms get away with a lot of stuff. Um, yeah, a lot of them should be in jail, quite frankly. And there's even one, and I won't mention his name, but he has evaded even the FBI. The FBI was after him, and they couldn't catch him. And he ended up training more male doms. He's sick. His website is sick. He is so fucked up that the BDSM community banned him from BDSM conventions. That's such next level. So it's like, but they're not the ones who are portrayed, like the male doms are not the ones who are portrayed as a problem. They're highly fetishized, they're sexualized. Look at 50 Shades of Grey. But people will villainize like especially female doms, and make them the center, and the vision of perversion and all things wrong. And like, I'm not saying that things that happen in BDSM aren't horrible, but I am saying that you don't get to use a dom, especially a female dom, and then turn around and shame them and treat them as the axis of all evil when you are part of it and you're part of the society that actually creates BDSM. And especially as a man, you're part of the patriarchal system that creates them, and then you exploit the dom, especially the female dom, and treat them as if they're what's wrong, and then you separate yourself and be like, I'm fine, they're the axis of all things wrong and perverse and grotesque, and all this other stuff. And it's like, what is your impact? What is your impact on the dom that you just exploited? What is your, no, like, now after you used her, now she's the problem. But you don't see your problem in the entire process of supporting BDSM, creating BDSM, being a part of the world and the way society works and patriarchy and how BDSM exists. And then it's all the dom's fault, especially the female doms, because it's usually not the male dom's fault. That's not where people go after. They're excused because patriarchy, but it's the female dom who gets used, exploited, and then blamed for all ills of the world. Just like at any place a woman exists or does anything in, that's where it comes to. So when I have these conversations, when I'm talking about these things, it is not, again, and I will say this repeatedly throughout my videos, it is not to create this mob mentality. That is the exact same mentality that created BDSM. Okay? All of that created the issues that created BDSM. So, that's not what I'm here for. I have seen it in the anti BDSM conversations, and um, it's alarming to me because it's like, you're not helping. You're not helping, and you're missing a lot of the story, right? So if you're in the anti BDSM conversation, feel free to sit here and get educated as well, because I promise you things aren't as clear cut as they may seem to you. And when you do this whole mob mentality conversation of down with everyone, you're not being conscientious of the people being exploited. You're not being conscientious of the doms who are being trafficked and those who identify as submissives who are being trafficked. This is trafficking, okay? BDSM, everyone is dealing with a lot of harm, whether conscious or not. Okay, there's a lot of doms being trafficked by pro doming. Okay, and there's a lot of submissives being trafficked by pro subbing. And people come in and they do heinous things, or they ask for heinous things, and yeah, that's a part of trafficking. The BDSM setup is very much a cult setup. So if you're, these, people who are in BDSM, most of them are not really conscious of what's going on. And you got to understand this has been happening for a long time, for quite a long time, and it's been imprinted, and they're continuing to imprint this into society. And so I'm trying to break the cycle of BDSM, and I'm trying to disband it. Like, I'm trying to teach people this is not it. There isn't one person who is spearheading all of BDSM, but I will tell you the people who are benefiting from this are higher up. Always goes higher. And they exploit, and they undercut, and they use, and they harm, and then the people in BDSM are left with all of this shit to process, and all of the weight from a society that doesn't understand what they survived.